So what is your name and title?
I'm Philip Wheeler. I'm the state senator for the 31st District, encompassing Pike, Martin, Lawrence, Johnson, and Elliott counties.
What has your career looked like up to this point?
Well, I began practicing law in 2004 with the same law firm I'm with now, Kirk Law Firm. I mainly practice workers' compensation law and represent coal miners who are injured on the job. I've also done some other cases throughout the years, including civil cases and courtroom work. I guess I made my first run for political office in 2016 for state representative. In the Republican primary, I came up just a little bit short, 190 votes, to Frankie Justice. He went on and was not victorious in the fall election. And then in 2019, after Judge Jones, Ray Jones, was elected the Pike County judge and resigned as state senator, I was chosen by the Republican convention in the 31st District to be the nominee for state senate. And my first run was against Darrell Pugh, who's currently running. He was a Democratic nominee at that time for Senate. He's currently running as a Republican for Pike County Clerk, but at that time he was a Democrat, and I ended up winning that election, I think, by around 500 and I think it was about 525 votes. I was reelected, of course, in 2020 with a much larger margin, about 72.8% of the vote. So.
Did you enjoy school?
Yes, I did. I've actually always liked school a whole lot. In fact, at one point in time, I'd even given some thought about whether maybe teaching college or history at the university level. In fact, I've always loved history. I took an AP course in history myself when I was in high school, AP American History, although I've actually always kind of been partial to European history. I did a double major in history and German at the Transylvania University in Lexington, Kentucky. After I actually graduated with honors in history and did a senior thesis on German propaganda in World War I. So that was my honors thesis, and I guess they liked it because I did get to graduate with honors. And following that, I taught English in Germany for a year, and that was a very interesting experience. But I came back and went to law school, and I guess that's been the career path for me at this point.
What do you consider your biggest accomplishment in your career?
Well, I guess one of my bigger accomplishments, I try to be a good dad and husband. Sometimes it's not the job that, it's a pretty tough job, but, as far as professional careers, I guess that's what we're talking about. Getting elected senator was something I'm very proud of in representing this area. My dad's father, I called him Papa, he was my grandfather. He served 8 years in the Kentucky State House and in the Ashland area, and actually made a run for Senate in 1972 and came up just a little bit short. So I kind of thought I always enjoyed spending time with him and speaking with him when I was a young man, and so getting elected senator, I look at as kind of carrying on his legacy in that sense.
Who have been role models for you and your biggest influences?
That's a tough one. There's been so many, and I mean, in a good way. As I mentioned, my grandfather, I always enjoyed speaking with him. He was a very strong Republican. He and my grandmother ran the Republican Party in Boyd County for nearly 50 years. He was a very profound influence in my life. I've also been profound with my other grandfather, my mom's dad. It's kind of funny. Now, he was a pretty hardcore Democrat, but he ran a towboat business on the Ohio River and really had a lot of good stories about, working on the Ohio River growing up during the Depression. So, I had wonderful grandparents, and then my dad and mother have both been very influential in my life. My dad is a local surgeon here, and has worked as an ophthalmologist and eye doctor here since 1985. He's always kind of taught me the value of helping other people, trying to fix their problems. I wasn't quite good as math and science as he was, so I tried to go a different route with that. But my mother was always a very caring person. I mean, she took care of a lot of other kids in the area, especially those maybe that didn't have as much. That she always was real good to look after them, and so some other kids that went to school with that maybe didn't have as many clothes to make sure that they had to do stuff. So I kind of like to think that she gave me some compassion in that sense, and they've both been very, very big role models in my life.
What made you want to go into law and become a senator?
Well, as I said, my grandfather, my dad's father, and I were very close, and he had a political career. I mean, it was over with really by the time I came into the world, but he always had a lot of political memorabilia around the house. He and my grandmother still ran the Republican Party afterwards, so there would always be people come by when they came to Ashland. Senator McConnell, a lot of other elected officials would always pay a call on my grandfather when they came to Ashland, and so I always really enjoyed that part of it. My grandfather actually had started a career in studying law, and had a couple of tragic circumstances earlier in his life where he wasn't really able to finish that up. He went back and took over the family business, a wholesale hardware store in Ashland, from his father, who had a pretty bad problem with alcohol at that time. And so he came back home. He had two younger brothers and his mother to kind of take over the family business and run that at that time. So again, he always talked to me about the law and about politics, so he was definitely a major influence and kind of pushed me in that direction.
In your opinion, how have politics changed over the years?
Well, that's an interesting question. I'll have to say, being a Republican in Eastern Kentucky for the first 20 years of my life was a pretty lonely place to be. Even today, to some extent, at a county level, the Democratic Party was the much larger party in Eastern Kentucky. But even on a state level or a national level, I mean, Bill Clinton won Pike County twice. I'm not sure if Bush won it the first time. He may have been the first in 2000. I can't recall. It was 2004 was maybe the first time that Pike County actually voted nationally for a Republican. McConnell didn't win it until I think 2000 and the late 2000s. So, but I always believed in the Republican Party. Somebody I mentioned earlier asked about influences in my life. Larry Forgy was a really great Republican politician that ran for governor in the mid-90s against Paul Patton here locally. And you talk about really being on an island. Even the Republicans were Paul Patton at that time. And my family had known Larry Forgy since the 60s. In fact, he was the budget director during the Nunn administration, Governor Louis B. Nunn. And my grandfather knew him, so we were always supporters of Larry Forgy. And Larry ran that time, and it was a pretty lonely place to be. But Larry kind of started a movement. To this day, I've never heard a better speaker out on the campaign trail. The guy was just magnificent, and would give some wonderful speeches. But from that standpoint, I think Pike County in Eastern Kentucky in general has always been conservative. I think as far as values go, but. I think to some degree the Republican Party has benefited by the fact that the National Democratic Party has left a lot of local Democrats and with their emphasis on very radical beliefs that just really don't connect with the people around here. I think that, and then you've had, President Trump in 2016, I think in particular, where he kind of pushed a more working class agenda with the Republican Party, really appealed to people. And so I think you've seen that the Republican Party is now actually starting to have more successes in Eastern Kentucky and rural Kentucky in general on a local level.
Who is like your favorite political figure, but lately or just in general?
Okay, lately, I'd say lately, probably one of my favorite political figures would have had to be Donald Trump. I mean, I won't say he's not a man without his flaws. I mean, he's a different type of individual. But, I really like the America First message that he brought brought out. I mean, he would get out there and say the things that a lot of people have been afraid to say over the last 20 to 25 years that, really I think a lot of our political class, both Democrat and Republican, had really not been representing America's interests, be it on, these trade deals where they got rid of American jobs, some of the other policies in Washington that harmed our coal industry and things like that. And I really think that he gave a voice to the voiceless, a lot of people throughout this country that really hadn't been heard, and he really expanded the Republican Party's base. Again, I'll say I'll take the good with the bad. Sometimes I think he could never let anything go, which was a big problem. I mean, I think I think that anybody that's been around politics will tell you if you fight every single battle, eventually you're going to get worn down, and I think that's what happened to him in the last election. I think if he had toned it down a little bit and maybe refocused on a lot of the really great stuff that he did, he would probably still be president right now. But he may be president again. I mean, that would be another great thing. I'd love to see him come back. But I definitely think he was a political anomaly. I mean, somebody I really enjoyed watching a lot of times, and I really think he moved the Republican Party forward in Kentucky and Eastern Kentucky in particular.
And lastly, what advice do you have for people my age?
What I would advise you is to get involved. I mean, politics sometimes doesn't seem that interesting, but a lot of things that young people are interested in, good schools, good roads, having jobs so that people can stay where they live at, or go on a trip and have a vacation. Health insurance. I mean, people don't think about that, but it's something that's very important. Being in politics really does decide, more than just about anything else. Where your state, where your country is going to invest, where they're going to, bring these things that communities need to thrive, how it gets brought home. And that's been my focus since I've been in Frankfort, is trying to bring as much investment into Eastern Kentucky, because we've had a very, very difficult time in the last decade to 15 years with the downturn of the coal industry. And it's gonna take some time to dig our way out, and I think the easiest way to dig our way out is shovel-ready jobs like construction, building the infrastructure that we need. And that includes schools, that includes roads, that includes, the foundations needed to build new businesses. So young people are an essential part of that. I mean, they are our future. Getting out and voting and getting involved and seeing that you too can be a part of it. I mean, I am the senator, but at the same time, I represent a region. I represent 115,000 people. So I'm, the day after an election is over with, you represent everyone, even the people that voted against you. And I think by getting involved, you can kind of see where you want to focus and how move the country in a direction that you want. So that's what I would say to young people is get involved. I mean, politicians, they may seem like they're far away, but in reality, they're people just like you and me.
Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, you're most
Is
welcome.
there anything else you'd like to add?
Nothing. I really appreciate you coming down. I wish you the best of luck on your project, and especially glad that you're studying history. I think that's something a lot of times is not studied enough nowadays. I mean, don't get me wrong, math and sciences are all extremely important. I would never take away from that, but you know, history, art, literature, I mean, those are the things really, if you look at our civilization, our Western civilization throughout history, those are the things that last. Those are things that have value, and I think that in many ways, those are the things that, you know, conservatism are really anchored on. So I applaud you for your project, and it's been a real pleasure speaking with you today.
Thank you very much.